Hey, Sens fans, welcome to Season 3, Episode 22 of the Senstennial Podcast. On today's episode, we are finally back from our Easter hiatus. I know it's been a couple of weeks. If you missed the last time we recorded something, it was actually a live stream with Will Scouch. He's a great prospects analyst, and that was a really fun conversation we had. So you can find that on YouTube because that's the only place where it's posted. So today we have a handful of topics that we're going to talk about. We got to catch up with some stuff. So we're going to kick it off talking about the Athletic article that came out now about Eugene Melnyk, I should specify, because there are a lot of Athletic articles. So it was written by Ian Mendez, Dan Robson, and Katie Strang. And it was very interesting. A lot of in-depth looks into the organization with Eugene Melnyk at the helm. Some things that it's rough to see written out, things that you might have expected happen behind the scenes, but wished hadn't, or, I guess the saying ignorance is bliss is kind of accurate in this situation. But alas, a lot of details came out. So we're going to touch on that. First of all, Matt, did you have any issues with the timing of it, or were you okay with it being released fairly shortly after Eugene Melnyk's passing?
It's a hard question. Mostly because when is a good time to put out a bit of a hit piece on somebody? I would assume that, the Athletic was able to determine that, Eugene Melnyk was on his deathbed. And I don't know about you, but I had heard about this article. I can't remember who's saying it. I think it was Ken Warren. Who had said, there's going to be a piece done by Katie Strang. She's working on it right now, about this, about Eugene Melnyk and the dealings of the Senators. So it's not like it was happening all of a sudden. It was coming, and it took a while. I think a lot of people obviously did have an issue with when it came out, because it came out 2 weeks after Eugene Melnyk passed away. With that said, though, there's never a good time to do it. So it just has to get done. And I think they probably picked as good a time as any to do it, because, if it's too far too far after his passing and the team is sold, then it's not really current. And if you do it while he's on his deathbed, well, you're putting out a piece on somebody who's dying. So it's a really it's a fine line that journalists and writers and so on have to walk. But at the same time, you have a due diligence as a journalist to tell that story and tell the stories of people who were directly affected by him. Right. And the way he ran things.
Yeah, I think for me, I initially was a little thrown off by the timing. I wasn't necessarily upset at them for releasing it when they did, but I think I was, I guess, of the mindset. Yucky. Yeah, it just kind of felt like, he passed. I know they'd been working on it for a long time, so don't get me wrong. And I agree with you that it needed to be said. Covering this up, I think, would be a lot worse. And having discovered the Chicago Blackhawks stuff, where, that was a very serious thing that happened. And thankfully, nothing happened to that level with any of the players, and having, Eugene Melnyk cover up for staff abuses and stuff. Glad that didn't happen in the organization, but there were some pretty damning things that happened that I think you would have liked to have seen released earlier, especially some of the homophobic stuff. I think that stuff being released closer to the time. Now, some of the sources I don't think wanted to talk until they felt comfortable doing so, or were working for the organization, felt like there could be retaliation or a lawsuit or something against them. So I think it's possible that some of the information, it's just because it wasn't available. And I believe Ian Mendez did touch on that. But
yeah,
I think looking at it now, I understand why the timing, why it was released when it did. But I think at the time I was a little like, "Ooh, this feels soon." But
Yep.
I think, of course, with time, when you have a little bit of time to just process and think about it, it's like, okay, I get it. I'm still not 100% with the timing, but I'm more understanding.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, after they had put out the story, they had said, there were a couple things that the team did threaten litigation with, so they didn't include it. And that's the stuff that's they couldn't even print. And they allowed some of the stuff.
Yeah.
It, as you say, like it felt a little icky, but there's no good time to do it. The homophobic stuff, the racial stuff when it came to the George Floyd death, and then the protests, and you have one of the few Black NHL players on your team, and you didn't really stand with him when it happened and when he needed you most.
Yeah.
And then, things going on with the employees, and when they were being emailed in the middle of the night, and then being accosted for not responding as soon as possible with derogatory words and so on and so forth. It's rough. Like, it was hard to read. And it would probably suck if I read that my dad was doing that sort of stuff. And then, reading that somebody, who would have been presumably pretty close to your family, in the Ukrainian gentleman who was hired by Melnyk, and reading that he talked about Melnyk, there's so much that was in that article in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now there were some positives, which
absolutely.
I'm glad it wasn't, and I'm not saying I'm glad it wasn't completely negative, because I'm trying to defend the honor of Eugene Melnyk. I think anybody who's listened to us long enough knows that we're not the biggest fans of Eugene Melnyk's running of the team, especially in recent years. But I'm just glad that it did show that while he seemed like not the best person, there were some individual acts that he did do that were positive and life altering, like that story about the Ukrainian man who I read his name and I was like, do I try to pronounce it?
I'm Ukrainian and I'm not going to try and pronounce.
Yeah, so that one's a rough one, but I'm gonna call him Mr. P. All right, there we go. Because Prepentanko or anyway. Yeah, so it was and that was without trying to look at the spelling. That was trying to guess off memory. But yeah, anyway, that was a positive story, and it was nice to see that. There was a lot of negativity overshadowing it, and they didn't even touch on some of the stories that have come out in recent years, like that whole suing of the yacht captain
or Jim Little, or the stuff with John Ruddy. Like,
there's a lot more. Yeah. So I think that has to be taken into account too. And I don't think we're trying to slam him now, especially what do you want to call it? In the wake of his passing, but anyway,
and in the wake of the article,
yeah, exactly. So it was very interesting. A lot of stuff laid out. I guess hoping to look ahead and brighter days, and hopefully, with new ownership, there will be a better and more ethical direction with the team. That's I think the best way I could put it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just kind of makes you wonder if this had come out and, Melnyk was still healthy, what would have happened? Because I think there was a lot of stuff in there that's pretty damning, and I can't imagine he would have been able to stick around, especially if there were more stories that could have come out uh, it's so hard, but I'm really glad that that there were journalists willing to be brave enough to really go after a story like this. And, you know, I saw some other local media maybe going at the authors of the story, and you know, it's just like, I'm sorry you did
other local journalists, eh?
Yeah, and you know, calling them journalists might be a bit of a stretch as it is, but it's just like, they did the job, they did what needed to be done, and I hope this is a bit of change of tide for Ottawa, the Ottawa Senators news coverage and media coverage, because it's an important story to be told. I really do genuinely hope it turns a new leaf. And we're going to see what happens going forward when it comes to the ownership.
And on that note, we'll kind of switch gears here and look at something a little bit more positive. So recently, Montreal rolls into town, and Ottawa, they have a little bit of what do you call it? Blood in the water. Like, fans are hyping it up on both sides. Like, oh, this game is going to be, you know, a bloodbath. And Scott Sabourin gets called up, and Sens fans are like, oh, there's going to be fighting, and everyone's going to be, you know, going after Gallagher. And, you know, people are going to, on the Habs, are going to play tough against Tim Stützle. And anyway, so we were expecting a pretty banger game, and I had tickets, and I'm glad I was able to go and saw some of, a couple of I think our listeners there. I saw at least a couple. And anyway, yeah, it was cool. And that was a hell of a game. Now, Ottawa came out on a steamroll in the second period and went up 5-1. And then the Habs scored a couple and, you know, got that power play towards the end of the second. It was a little bit worrying, but then Formanton got that shorthanded goal to put them up 6-3. And of course, Montreal gets one in the third, but not enough. And Ottawa ends up hanging on for that 6-4 win. Now, in the midst of that, Gallagher got a roughing minor at one point for hitting Tim Stützle after Stützle had kind of, as a board battle had happened, he had kind of gone to the ice, and then Gallagher gave him like a few extra more punches than he should have in that situation. And he knew what he was doing. The refs call him on it. Anyway, there was no real fight against Gallagher. I know Gallagher didn't shake Tkachuk's hand, and he apologized for not doing that for the ceremonial puck drop. And
I think that's a little funny because, you know, kids are watching. You have to, you set an example, you know?
I was waiting for you to do that. No, for sure. And I get Gallagher's excuse was that people were booing him, so he got distracted. Now, I do find that pretty funny. And I mean, hey, maybe that is totally honest, but I kind of chuckled when that was his reason. Like, oh, I wasn't expecting to be booed so much. I guess he was expecting the Habs fans to own the CTC. But despite the large number of Habs fans in attendance, I think it was a really fun atmosphere. There was cheering and jeering on both sides. I know in my section, whenever Habs fans started to boo Tim Stützle, we all started to applaud and go like, Tim. So that was kind of fun.
That's so funny.
And I know some people were like, come on, Jimmy. So that was good. And, you know, whenever Gallagher came out, Sens fans would boo, and it was great. So it was a fun time. Glad the Sens won, but I'll let you give your thoughts on it.
I think it was a systematic dismantling of the Habs. And I think the top lines of the Senators just let the fourth line do their thing. They were like, you know what? We don't need to step up to beat this shit team. And that is exactly what the Habs are. They are bad. Like, they're hilariously bad. They got 6 goals scored on them by a fourth line. And on their elite, you know, world beater goalie.
I do want to say, though, that Carey Price has played 4 games this season and was in rehab.
Absolutely. And he's been practicing for 2 months.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't like, I have a lot of respect for Carey Price. So
I think Price is great, but this is what needs to be done. If you're gonna go on our players, then I'm gonna go on yours.
All right, go off, King.
Yeah, that's it. Like, I think the Habs have a long way to go. Nick Suzuki should probably step up. Cole Caulfield looks pretty good, which I hate. I don't like him. Don't like his face. Joel Edmondson thinks he's way better than he actually is. Yeah, I mean, and like there are Habs beat writers that just like will be relentless in trying to like talk about Tim Stützle. And I can appreciate the fact that a skilled European winger is igniting this rivalry yet again. But like as it stands, like the Habs are probably going to draft first overall. And like,
unless they move back, that would be really great.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I would love to see them, finish last and then lose the draft lottery. That's like my ideal scenario for them.
And the draft lottery is in like, I think a couple of weeks from now.
Yeah, I think it's May 10th.
Yeah, so just like about 2 weeks, almost on the dot.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. It was a fun game to watch. I mean, like Parker Kelly put on a show, Mark Kostelic put on a show, and those are two guys who should be like already penciled in on our fourth line next year. Then finish it.
No, go ahead.
Finish it off with Austin Watson, because I know he's got 1 year left on his deal. It's gonna be a really interesting next couple of years. But I think like the Senators are up on their rebuild. Like, I understand that the Habs lost out on Carey Price. They lost Shea Weber. They hilariously dunked on themselves by losing Philip Deneau. And they tried to bring in like quality players, but it just didn't work out for them. So,
well, they brought in players who had pedigree but were declining. Like Mike Hoffman wasn't a bad player to sign, but to sign for 3 years,
yeah,
I don't think that was smart. And I think David Savard, personally, I was so shocked that Columbus got what they got for David Savard, because I was watching some of his games in Columbus before the deadline. And I was like, am I missing something? And I would go to Hockey Reference and I would look at some of his stats, and some of the basic advanced analytics like Corsi and the expected goals for, goals against, stuff like that. And I was like, I'm kind of surprised that there's such high talk about this guy. And I guess it's because he was a right-handed shot. I know Mark Mathod loved him and wanted him in Ottawa, actually, this free agency, but they didn't sign him. And I'm glad they haven't, because he's regressed. But anyway,
he's quite mediocre. Like, yeah. he got a first round pick and he played on the third pairing in Tampa when they traded him.
Yeah.
And I remember watching his first game there because it just so happened to be on. And I was like, wow, this guy is not very good, but I guess was a standout in Columbus because there wasn't much to stand out from, but hey.
Yeah. But anyway, this is an Ottawa Senators podcast, so we won't focus too much on the Habs issues. I think going off what you were saying about that fourth line, yeah, I think next season you roll in with Kastelic, Kelly, and Watson on that fourth line. Hopefully Shane Pinto good to go to start next season, and you just throw him alongside Formenton and Conor Brown. Your second line, I think you find a top six, either left wing or right wing, because I know Mathieu Joseph, I know he plays right wing, but he shoots left. So I'm wondering if he can be a bit diverse there, versatile. And if you could put him on that left wing and then bring in, I know people want Claude Giroux or Kevin Fiala. I threw some names out on Twitter the other day of some top six forwards who are free agents this year, like Burakovsky, Ryan Strome. Nazem Kadri would be a fun one, but I think he's going to get big money elsewhere. But yeah, you just get someone to play with Joseph and Stützle. And then on that first line, you go back with Kachuk, Norris, Batherson, and I know this season there's been some highs and lows for those three guys, and also Batherson spending a lot of time injured didn't help. But I think you throw those guys back at least to start the season, and if you need to, you can put Bath back on the second line with Timmy, and I think that lines you up with a pretty depth-filled forward core if they can stay healthy. And then on the back end, I mean, Jake Sanderson coming in. Well, you know what? We're going to get to expectations for players next year. So you know what? I won't get ahead of myself. Maybe I'll stop it there, and we'll just go into my next point, which was going to be about injuries this season. And I just brought up Batherson. Now to end the season, the guys who have been shut down for the final 3 games are Conor Brown, Colin White, Shane Pinto, Matt Murray, Jake Sanderson, Thomas Chabot. He came back in against Montreal, but he did not look like himself. I don't think he was 100%. I think the Sens wanted to ice the best lineup they could to beat the Habs. And funny enough, Chabot, I think, ranked as their worst. Well, different analytic charts show different things. One of the ones I saw, he was actually ranked as Ottawa's worst player of the night, which is pretty funny. And I don't think that's, any indication of really Thomas Chabot's skill. It's more just an off night. He's come back off injury, and I don't think he's ready. So anyway, but injuries playing a huge factor down the stretch here. Now we won't get to see Jake Sanderson play until next year, which is really too bad. But well, I mean, we can talk about just injuries, just crushing this team this year if you want.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't realize there were only 3 games left. So it's putting into perspective that, Colin White, Conor Brown, Matt Murray, Shane Pinto, all those guys are shut down. I think the one name that, needed the rest of this season was Colin White, because of that possible buyout looming. Look, like he's performed not well under his current contract, and frankly, like he's pretty severely overpaid. And I remember when they signed him, it's like if he plays well defensively, then he'll be like $1 million more overpaid than what he should be playing. And if he continues his production that he was getting when he was with Mark Stone, then he'll be right around where he should be getting paid. But in this case, like he was out majority of the season. He was injured quite a bit last year as well. He just can't seem to get healthy. I think, and there was clearly interest at the deadline. If you find a deal to get him off your books, you should probably take it.
And on that note, actually, because the rumor was that Ottawa was talking to Montreal about it and that it came down to the wire, Montreal said,
we're back to the Habs.
Hey, this is related to the Sens at least. When I thought about that, I went on Cap Friendly and I looked for a while. I'm like, who would the Senators be interested in? Who would the Habs be willing to trade? Now, I believe Byron and Durant both have 1 year left. So right away, I'm like, those guys have 1 year left. The Habs aren't going to take a guy who I believe has 3 years left for a guy that has 1. So I tried to look at players who have 2 or 3 years left and are considered non-essential or non-core players. And the one that stuck out to me, and this was just a thought, we'll see if it ends up happening in the offseason, is Yoel Armia. Him, to me, is like a Conor Brown-esque player. Maybe not the same offensive capabilities, but defensively is known for that anyway. But it just kind of struck me as interesting because he has the same term left, but he only gets paid $3.4 million. He's a known right wing depth player. I think if the Sens traded Colin White, they probably see him as a right wing in their organization right now. You'd be replacing him with a right wing. And, for the Habs, they're getting a guy who does have more offensive upside, but he's just been injured. So it's like an unknown. And Armia is obviously a few years older. Just an idea, just a thought. But speaking about Colin White more, since he signed that deal and in that season where he played with Stone, he had 41 points in 71 games. Since that season, he has declined in his numbers of games played quite drastically. So the season after, he had 41 in 71. He then had 23 points in 61 games. Then he had 19 points in 45 games. And this season, 10 points in 24 games. So not only is he declining in production, he's declining in games played too. And that's not great. I do think that Colin White, if given the opportunity, could be a nice middle six winger, potentially center. He can't stay healthy. I think that really derailed his development. If the Sens do buy him out this summer, I understand it. I'm fine with it. The penalty is really,
I just pulled it up. It's essential. Yeah. 875. It's basically an entry level contract.
And I think in the fourth, because the buyout would be about 6 years. I think in the fourth year of the deal, the Sens actually get plus like $650K of cap space. There's like 1 year.
Yeah, in the third year. Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. So anyway, wild. That might be where he's going. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I mean, and so hypothetically, if Yoel Armia is the one who comes back, maybe that makes Conor Brown expendable and the Sens use him as some sort of trade bait. Again, all just hypotheticals. This was maybe more turning into an off-season podcast.
Yeah, but, I mean, obviously, it sucks to see guys like Conor Brown and Shane Pinto and Jake Sanderson all shut down. I think obviously the biggest bummer is that Sanderson, we don't get to see him play. It would be really awesome if Jake Sanderson could play in the playoffs in the AHL. But I don't believe that's going to be happening. I don't think he's really close, and they want him as healthy as possible for when he comes into training camp next year. So on that vein, like Conor Brown is an interesting piece when it comes to the fact that like he was on pace for a career year and then just tapered off so abruptly, and it sucks. Like, it's not great, and you hope guys like that continue their success, because he had an amazing end of the season last year, whereas this one he just sort of flamed out. And it begs the question, like, would it be a good trade chip like you brought up? I think he's a good third line player on a good team.
Yep.
And I think a third line of him, Shane Pinto and Alex Fermenton is something that could really make some noise against other third lines in the NHL. So I think all of those guys being shut down, it's weird for a lot of different reasons, but I think it is what it is. Like, it's unfortunate, but I'm so excited for next season.
Yeah, honestly, I am too. And I think maybe we can kind of pivot a little bit to our expectations for next year. Now, we didn't touch on Matt Murray, because I think that's another thing that's really interesting. And for me, it's complicated, I think, because I think as a fan base, Ottawa Senators fans turn on goalies like nothing. You saw it with Craig Anderson. And he was a super solid, reliable goalie, especially in the playoffs. He had great playoff numbers with the Sens. And then, you look at what Matt Murray's done, and for the most part, I think people are fair. He hasn't been as good as everyone wants him to be. He's also been injured a ton, 5 times on the IR this season alone, which is brutal. For me, with Matt Murray, I think when he is healthy, and when he is mentally dialed in, he is a hell of a goalie. And I think we saw that, right? It was like a 10-game streak where he was phenomenal, but the team wasn't able to put up as many wins because the offense dried up. And I think Sens were dealing with a bout of injuries, Batherson being out, Norris getting injured for 15 games. But anyway, Anton Forsberg has also been a hell of a goalie for the Sens. Ranks in the top half of the NHL in save percentage this season. Nothing to shake your head at. I think Gus has a ways to go, but it will be interesting to see where Matt Murray fits in next season. Like, what are they going to do with him? Are they going to just put him on waivers? Are they going to carry 3 goalies in the NHL? Would they buy him out? Well, it's just like, I have no idea. And so that I think will be a really interesting thing to watch going into the offseason.
I think there are going to be teams looking for goalies. Obviously Edmonton is going to consistently be one of them until they figure their stuff out. The Leafs, I think.
The only problem, sorry to interrupt, but my problem is that this year's free agency for goalies is pretty decent. So I don't think that the market for Matt Murray is going to be that hot, especially even if the Sens have to retain. I think that a team will go out there and maybe get Korpisalo for half of Murray's salary, or go get, who's the other one? Not Darcy Kempfer. He's Colorado's backup.
Pavel Francouz. He signed.
It's not. I think they had another guy. I don't know, maybe it was him, but when I had checked like a couple weeks ago, they had a guy who was unsigned. I thought it was him, but I guess not. Anyway, there's a few goalies. Actually, Kempfer's a free agent. I think Murray won't be a first choice, definitely, for a lot of teams. And I think his health is like reason number one. And I think the other guy who will be on the block that'll be cheaper than Murray, even cheaper at retained salary, would be Mrazek. The Leafs picked up, right? So he's another guy that if you're a team, who are you going to take? If he can do 50% retained, are you taking a younger goalie? Well, younger in quotations. Actually, maybe they're the same age, actually, because Murray is like, what, 28?
I think Murray's 26.
No, he's older than that. I am doing a check right now.
All right. Well, I mean, you're not wrong. Like there are a strong group of goalies this year that are going to be free agents.
Yeah, Murray turns 28 next month.
Okay. All right. So he's 27.
And I'll look up the Mraz and see what and Mrazek is actually 30. Holy crap, dude. I am old.
That's wild.
I thought Mrazek was still like 26, 27. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Anyway. I never mind. Cut that. Oh geez. But still, I do think that if someone's going to trade for a goalie, I think Mrazek has shown that he can play when put behind a solid defensive core, but especially when he was playing on Carolina last season. So I think there would be a little bit more interest in him than Murray, but remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think there are some goalies around the league that could pique a team's interest. A guy like Casey DeSmith, Ville Husso is going to be very interesting in St. Louis. He just sort of became a starter overnight. Washington has to sign both of their goalies, which also, I don't know. Like, did they change the rules when it came to the expansion draft? Because the Capitals just got Vanacek back like a week later by trading him, and I remember we couldn't do that with Mathot. So they must have changed things.
Yeah, I'm not too sure how that worked out, but anyway, okay. Well, let's look at our expectations then for next year beyond the crease. So let's look defensively. For example, Thomas Chabot, I think he regressed offensively this season. Early in the season, I think he took some strides forward defensively. But then as the season went on, I think he kind of returned back to being more average. So I guess, like, what are your thoughts on Thomas Chabot next season and Jake Sanderson? Because those, I think, I'm not going to see the biggest question marks. I think Jake Sanderson's the biggest question mark on what will his capability be.
Yeah.
But more, what do you expect from Thomas Chabot? And then what do you think Jake Sanderson will bring to the table?
I think next year, Chabot is going to have a partner that he can run with the entire season, barring injury. It's either going to be Artem Zub or Travis Hamonic. Preferably Zub. or if they go out and get another right-hand defenseman. I think he'll have the stability. He'll be playing with a more shutdown guy, and that'll give him the opportunity to sort of run wild when it comes to his offense. We know he can play well defensively. We know he can play well offensively. This year was sort of like him trying to find the perfect mixture. And now we're going to do this next season. I think we're going to see him get more points than he did this season, barring any injuries. And he's going to be playing better, in my opinion, than he has. Maybe he's even in a Norris conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can do a bold prediction.
Yeah, I think he has the capability to do it. His skating he's one of the best skating defensemen in the league. And I think it's hard to be a Norris caliber defenseman on a terrible team. I don't want to, put my foot in my mouth yet again and say, like, looking at what we're seeing now, this team is turning a page and so and so and so and so. We're going to have better pieces in place next year to be, and guys are just another year older, another year stronger to be able to really, really compete and beat some good teams, and win those easily winnable games against crappier teams. But Thomas Chabot, I think he's also probably going to start feeling some pressure from Jake Sanderson being, the number one guy.
I don't know if he'll, I know there's a lot of hype over Jake Sanderson, and trust me, going into the 2020 draft, my draft choices of who I wanted were, Lafreniere I cut out because I knew we weren't going to get him unless we drafted him first. Yeah.
So
it was Tim Stützle, then it was Lucas Raymond, and my third choice was Jake Sanderson.
You didn't want Byfield?
I did. Okay. I had a bias being that I have German background. I really wanted the Sens to draft a German. So I watched a lot of Byfield. I watched a lot of Stützle highlights. And in my mind, Stützle was the more dynamic player. Byfield was the more prototypical, power forward. And I felt like the Sens had that in Brady Tkachuk. And so I really wanted them to get someone who had that flashy offensive skill. And he hasn't disappointed with that. But anyway, all I'm trying to say is when it came to the Sanderson or Drysdale, when it came to that debate, not Draisaitl, because, they couldn't pick him, but Drysdale. When it came to those two, I was like, you know what? There's players who come into the league and they have offensive capabilities, but they get absolutely torched or burned. And then you shoot their confidence. And then they wind up just not really being much of a help except on the power play. And I'm not trying to throw Branch from under the bus. I do think that, he was one of those guys who his offensive skill was really hyped up. I think defensively, he's had his highs and lows this season, like a lot of players have on this team. But I think that with Jake Sanderson, he had the defensive side of the puck all figured out. And I listened to, I know coaches are biased, but I read interviews with his coaches. I watched a lot of tape wherever I could of him. And I saw that he was very competent defensively. He's a very smart player. And to me, he will be if you have him and Chabot as your 1-2 on the left side, holy crap. That is going to be hard to play against if Jake Sanderson even meets the criteria of because I think comparisons at the draft were Ryan McDonough. I personally think that Jake Sanderson could be a better defensive Ryan McDonough, and that would be huge to have. And I'm talking prime Ryan McDonough, not slowly regressing Ryan McDonough. I think that Jake Sanderson could be that guy. And if you have Chabot and Sanderson hypothetically playing 90% of your hockey game with those two, one of the two being on the ice, holy crap, man, you're in good shape. And so I'm not trying to hope that he becomes Victor Hedman, because I find every defensive defenseman that has some offensive upside this day and age that's like, oh, that guy's like Victor Hedman.
Yeah.
You know, I know when Power got that. I don't, you know, I don't want Jake Sanderson. Like, I don't want to put him on this pedestal if he will overtake Shabbat as being a better defenseman. I just want him to fully develop into his own player. You know, I don't want him modeled after one guy or another. I want him to be like a beast defensively, you know, like advertised, and then just bring that offensive skill that will just wow you, you know, that you're like, damn, like a Charlie McAvoy, who you're just like, man, this guy is really solid. He doesn't light it up on the scoreboard, but when he's on the ice, you feel as a fan, you're like, I'm comfortable with him playing the power play, 5-on-5, defending on a penalty kill, anything, high pressure situations. That's what I want him to be, like an all around, just chef's kiss kind of player. That's my little rant. I kind of went off there. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
that's fair. I mean, I think you're right. Jake Sanderson coming in with pedigree, and like every year draft analysts have been like, wow, Jake Sanderson, we were wrong about Jake Sanderson. And where his ceiling was and how good he's going to be. And I think there was a bit of that with Shabbat as well. And then, you know, Shabbat winning MVP of the entire World Juniors tournament, but as a defenseman, never been done before. So being able to see that's exciting. And I think Jake Sanderson has the capability of being a number one defenseman. It was more a tongue-in-cheek comment, but I could see Shabbat taking that next step,
right,
and really solidifying himself as an elite two-way defenseman. And then Jake Sanderson coming in next year, and you know, probably putting up maybe 20-25 points.
Okay, maybe I was a little more bold. I was going to say 30 to 40. Is that a little too bold?
I mean, as a rookie, that's excellent. I'm tempering my expectations on that front. I prefer to see him be good defensively. I want to see an all-around game from him, and I wouldn't be upset if he only scored 20 points and, you know, everybody was like, Jake Sanderson's still very good defensively.
So essentially, if he became like an Artem Zub 2.0 in his rookie year.
If he played like Artem Zub in his rookie year, that's amazing.
Just because Zub's put up 22 points.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he's able to take the next step. Right. But he's 20 years old. He's going to be good. So that's sort of where I'm at with Sanderson.
All right. And then we'll move quickly on to the forward core. And, you know, the young guns that they have there are Josh Norris, Brady Tkachuk, Drake Batherson, and Tim Stützle. You also have Mathieu Joseph, who I know is approaching 25, but I still see him as like a young player who has a lot to give, a lot of, like, I have a lot of time for him is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I think he has more to develop. I think he showed in his brief stint with the Sens that he has a lot to offer. To me, he seems like essentially an upgraded Formenton. And we can add Formenton to my list, actually, of players. Like the expectations for these guys next season.
Yeah.
When you look at the top four for Sens scores this year, in order, you have Tkachuk with 62. Then you have Norris with 53, Stützle with 53, and then Drake Batherson with 42 points, respectively. Now, Batherson, 42 points in 43 games, but you know, the point still stands. Those guys were top 5 in scoring for the Sens this year. All young guys. And even, you know, Conor Brown after him, it's Thomas Chabot. And after Thomas Chabot, Alex Formenton. So Conor Brown is the only guy who is older than 25 on that list.
Yeah, no, that's a great problem to have. I mean, expectations wise, I definitely see Josh Norris hitting 40 goals. Like I would be disappointed in him if he did not score 40 goals. I see Brady Tkachuk probably hitting 50 or 70 points next year. I see Stützle getting 70 plus points. And I think Drake Batherson, like with the caliber of play he was putting on, I think he's above 70 as well. I think he could be an 80 point guy. that's what's so impressive. And Stützle is approaching 60 points, and he's in his second year in the NHL. The guy is phenomenal. And, you know, he's everything you would want in a player. And Tkachuk probably has the lowest ceiling out of all of them, and he's still an excellent player.
Oh yeah. And I think he's elevated his game this season.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with consistency of line mates and, knock on wood, not all these injuries to key players and for long terms. All of that to me is going to be super important when it comes to taking that next step as a team next year. But I have pretty high expectations of those four guys. I think Alex Formenton, I know at the start of the season, I said he could score 23 goals. I think he's at like 17 or 18 this season.
Yeah, he is currently at 18.
Yeah, so he's 5 off. And that was when he was going to be playing in the top 6 for an extended period of time. He bounced around a lot and did not get opportunities on even the second power play.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of untapped potential there, and he's only 22. So I could see 45 plus points next year. Same with Matthew Joseph as well. In the right situation, playing with the right players, like those are guys that'll take the next step next year. And our forward core is pretty set, almost like as it is right now. Yeah. Once you just input Shane Pinto and take out Colin White, take out Dylan Gambrell, take out Gaudette, Tierney, and Ennis. Well, I guess it's not totally. I would love to keep Ennis, but
Ennis.
I know I just don't. I don't know if there's room.
I think it's the 13th forward.
Oh yeah, if that's an option, then heck yeah, I absolutely do that.
I did see someone on Twitter say that this year's free agency isn't the best. I think this year's is actually far deeper than last year's free agency class. So I could see the Sens even filling in a need of a guy who's got some I don't know, either playoff pedigree as a depth player, maybe like not Corey Perry, but a player kind of like that. To come in as a player who can come in injuries and be a good locker room presence. I could see that. Not that I think Tyler Ennis isn't that. I think that the guys love him. And if he came back as a 13th forward, that'd be fine. But, like we talked about this episode and like we've seen this season, injuries happen. So they'll need at least a couple guys who are ready to step in.
I mean, you never know. Maybe Ottawa throws a ton of money at Johnny Gaudreau.
Oh my God! I mean, I don't think that'll happen. But if you put him, not. Or if I don't know, the Sens somehow made this big play and brought in Philip Forsberg or something. And he was with.
I think it almost looks like Fiala is that big guy. Forsberg has 80. Fiala has 84. Well, they're both excellent players. Fiala is the RFA. So you have to give up an asset. But, if you're able to get a guy like Philip Forsberg on this team playing with Tim Stützle, that is very good.
Yes. And I don't think that'll happen. It's just my point being that this free agency class has some really nice talent. And if the Sens could somehow throw some breadcrumbs down and get one of those guys to come in and jump into the top 6, I think you're looking mighty fine going into next season, barring a slew of injuries. But and the last thing I'll say is you were mentioning the age of these guys. If you talk about Tkachuk, Norris, Stützle, Batherson, Formenton, the oldest guy of those is Batherson, and he is 23. It's pretty wild that your entire top 6 is 23 or younger, essentially. Yeah. I know, like I said, if Joseph comes in and he's playing on one of your wings, okay, he becomes your oldest top 6 forward at 24, 25. Yeah. And that is not bad at all. You can have this core grow. I hope that Norris gets signed long-term this summer, Stützle next summer, and you keep this core together because I think in the next 2-3 years, they're going to start making some moves and maybe being the underdogs and upsetting a team or two in the playoffs. So looking forward to it.
You couldn't have said it better. I mean, they could also maybe go for a big splash in Evgeny Malkin,
Oh man. Yeah.
35-year-old Evgeny Malkin.
Yeah. I made that. I think I made kind of a joke like last summer because the Sens wanted a top 6 forward, right?
Yeah.
And you swear every year that Pittsburgh's going to let one of their guys go, not Crosby, of course, but like Letang, Malkin.
Yeah.
It always seems like, okay, they're declining and then they just have an amazing year and they get into the playoffs and manage to win a round or whatever.
Yeah.
But I remember joking last year that, Sens should go out and get Evgeny Malkin. He has a year left on his deal. But anyway, I don't think that's going to happen. But if the Sens could even, like I mentioned earlier, if they could bring in a guy like Burakovsky or Ryan Strome, now that they don't have to trade for him, I know that worried a lot of people giving up assets for that guy.
Yeah.
But one of those two, I think one of the ones I mentioned was Vincent Trocheck. He didn't have an outstanding offensive season, but I think he's a guy who can generate offense. And if I'm not mistaken, is good on both sides of the puck. If he wasn't,
same with Valeri Nichushkin,
Okay. So somebody brought that up on our Twitter account.
I think I brought it up.
No, somebody else responded to one of our tweets where I was naming free agents the Sens could go after, and they said Nichushkin. And I said, what worries me is that he's been playing top line minutes with Nathan MacKinnon. So how many of those points is he actually generating as a result of his own play rather than playing top 6 minutes with Nathan MacKinnon? That's my biggest issue.
I mean, like Ryan Strome's playing with Artemi Panarin.
Is he playing on that top line? I didn't think he was.
Yeah.
I thought Panarin was playing with Zibanejad. Okay. I just think Ryan Strome has more offensive upside because he's shown it more consistently. Nichushkin's had one good season. That worries me. I'd be wary.
Well, this is his second. I'm pretty positive he had a good season last year as well.
I think he had like 30 points.
Well, it was the smaller season. It was a 21-point season in 55 games.
Yeah.
But
so he doesn't like blow me out of the water. Whereas Burakovsky, when he was in Washington, he had offensive skill, and I don't think he was ever really able to blow it out of the water, whether he just didn't play enough games in a season or what have you. And I think when he went to Colorado, he really was able to more emerge offensively. And he's shown it for a few seasons now with Colorado, which worries me less than Nichushkin, who showed it for one. That's all.
Yeah. Or like, I know you also brought up Ricard Brickell, and like, that's a guy that I've always been really intrigued by because I think the Anaheim's never like Getzlaf has been on a steady decline for a couple of years now, and they haven't had top center talent for a little bit now. Yeah. And I think a guy like that adding to Tim Stützle's wing, that'll take you places for sure.
Yeah, and with me, I was honestly a little, I guess wary is the word I'll keep using. I was a little wary of Raquel before he went to the Penguins. I was like, offensively, he's been okay, but he's only had one season or two seasons where he's absolutely been like, damn, that's a top 6 forward. And those were in his earlier years with Anaheim. With Pittsburgh, he's shown his offensive game again, 13 points in 17 games since being traded there at the deadline. That's great. Yeah. I just don't know if I trust him as being like a real top 6 forward. If the Sens go out and they sign a guy like Raquel or Nichushkin and like that's their top 6 forward, I'm not like, oh sweet, we got that top 6 forward. I'm like, okay, like let's see if they are a top 6 forward or if they're like a Dodonov. So it's tough, but I think we can maybe sideline that for an off-season episode, if you will.
There's a lot of questions that'll get answered at some point or another.
We've gone off the agenda here, but I think we had some fun, and it's always great to talk hockey and speculate on the off-season. So that's always fun to do. If you've been listening or watching this long, thank you so much. Like I said earlier in the episode, we did a live stream on YouTube with Will Scouch. 2 weeks ago. It was a while. It was about an hour and a half, I think, we spent with him, but it was great. We talked a lot about prospects, who the Sens could be interested in, who might fit in with Tim Stützle if drafted, and a lot of questions. We talked about a bunch of different guys, including Brad Lambert, Ty Nelson. I know those were two guys we talked a little bit more about. And then there's some top 6 guys like Slavkovsky, Kemmel. If you like prospects, you'd like that. So check that out. And of course, all our social medias, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit at the Senstennial or at Senstennial. And yeah, that really covers it, I think. And if you're listening or watching, then you know where to find our content. So that's perfect.
Hell yeah.
On that note, on that spiel, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Senstennial Podcast. And Bennett, this one's for you. Bennett couldn't join us today because he's a very busy man, but he did want to mention that while he's seen progress with Brady Tkachuk, he wants him to fix those finer details in the passing of his game. So that one's for you, Bennett. I hope you're happy we included this in the episode.
Yeah.
Okay. So have a great night, everybody. Go Sens, go. And let's finish out the season strong.
Go Sens, go, everybody.